My husband cheated on me for months with his receptionist. I went to my parents' house crying and begging for help, but they blamed me, said I was a bad wife, and slammed the door. Now I'm married to a millionaire, and my parents came back begging for forgiveness. What my new husband told them left them speechless. I'm 32 years old. I work in digital marketing, and I need to tell this story because what happened a few years ago with my parents basically destroyed me in a way I didn't even know was possible. And now that I'm married to Dominic and things are finally good, I feel like I can talk about this without completely falling apart. I guess I should start from the beginning. When I was still married to Trevor and thought I had a normal life. You know, nothing spectacular but stable. Trevor worked at a logistics company. I had my job. We lived in a decent apartment. And I honestly thought we were happy. Or at least that's what I told myself. Every time I noticed he was coming home late or spending too much time on his phone. The truth is, I probably saw the signs months before everything exploded, but I didn't want to see them. You know what I mean? It's easier to ignore things than admit your marriage is falling apart. Everything came crashing down on a Tuesday night, like 8 p.m., I think, when Trevor left his phone on the table while he went to the bathroom, and I saw a notification that said something like, "I miss you, can't wait to see you tomorrow," with a heart emoji. And I just stood there, staring at the screen, thinking, is this really happening? I grabbed the phone. You know, that moment where your heart beats so fast you feel like you're going to throw up? And I started reading the messages with someone he had saved as Mike from work, but who clearly wasn't any Mike. It was months of conversations, photos, plans to meet at hotels, stuff that made me feel like the stupidest person on the planet. When Trevor came out of the bathroom and saw me with his phone, he didn't even try to deny it. He just stood there and said, "I'm sorry, Claire. I didn't want you to find out like this." As if the way I found out was the problem and not the fact that he'd been sleeping with his office receptionist for months. But the thing is, I didn't have anywhere to go at that moment. We lived in his apartment, technically. I mean, he'd bought it before we got married and my name was never on the papers. And that night, after the most horrible fight of my life, where I threw everything I could find at him, and he just stood there saying things just happened. I grabbed my backpack with whatever I could, and the first thing I thought was to go to my parents' house. Peter and Christine, my parents, lived like 40 minutes away, and I thought, well, at least I'll have a place to stay while I figure this out. I got to their house around 11 at night, crying so hard I could barely speak, and when my mom opened the door and saw me there with my swollen face and backpack, the first thing she said was, "What happened?" And I explained everything through sobs, that Trevor had cheated on me, that I needed to stay with them for a few days while I found a place, that please help me. And here comes the part I still can't believe happened. My mom looked at me, called my dad, and they both told me I couldn't stay. Just like that, literally, they told me no. My dad said something like, "Claire, you obviously did something to make Trevor look for someone else. Men don't cheat for no reason." And my mom nodded and added that I should go back home, apologize to Trevor, and fix my marriage because divorce was an embarrassment to the family. I stood there at their door, in total shock, thinking this had to be a nightmare, that my own parents weren't turning me away when I needed them most. I tried to explain to them. I told them, he cheated on me for months. I have proof. I saw the messages, but my dad just shook his head and said, "I don't want to hear excuses, Claire. You clearly weren't being a good wife." And then he shut the door in my face. I stood there for like 5 minutes, literally unable to move, until I finally called my friend Angela, who thank God answered and told me to come to her house immediately. Angela and her husband Stephen took me in that night, gave me their guest room, and basically saved my life, because honestly, I don't know what I would have done if they had rejected me too. The next few days were a total blur. I got a lawyer, started the divorce proceedings, and cut all contact with Trevor and my parents. My siblings had mixed reactions, let's say. Leonard and Clara, the oldest ones, basically sided with my parents and sent me messages saying I was being dramatic and should reconsider the divorce. Oscar and Hazel, who live out of state and have health issues, supported me but from a distance. You know, occasional calls asking how I was but couldn't do much more. The divorce took like 8 months to finalize, and during that time I moved into my own apartment, a small place but mine, and I focused on completely rebuilding my life. I blocked my parents from everything, changed my number so Trevor couldn't contact me, and basically started from zero at 27 years old. It was the darkest period of my life. I'm not gonna lie. There were days where I didn't want to get out of bed, where I thought maybe my parents were right and I had done something wrong. But Angela and Stephen, along with some other friends from work, constantly reminded me that none of what happened was my fault, that Trevor was an idiot and my parents were worse for how they treated me. Like 2 years passed where I basically just worked, went to therapy, something you should have done way earlier, and tried to heal. I didn't go out much, didn't feel like meeting new people, and definitely didn't want to even think about another relationship. But then, like 3 years ago, you think I was 29, Angela convinced me to go out to dinner at this new restaurant that had opened near where we lived. It was a nice place. Not too fancy, but clearly quality, and the food was amazing. At one point, the owner came out to greet the tables, like some chefs do, and he got to ours. His name was Dominic. He was like 34 at the time, and there was something about him that was different. I don't know how to explain it. He was friendly, but not in an over-the-top way, made jokes about the dishes, and when he asked me what I thought of the food, we ended up talking for like 20 minutes about recipes and ingredients. Angela kicked me under the table several times during that conversation because it was super obvious that Dominic was flirting with me, but I was so out of practice that I basically turned red and stammered something about how delicious everything was. When we left, Dominic gave me his personal card, not the restaurant's, his personal card, and told me that if I ever wanted to come back, he'd make me something special. Angela practically screamed in the parking lot, "That man is crazy about you, Claire. You have to call him." But I was terrified. Honestly, I hadn't been on a real date in years. My last boyfriend had cheated on me and destroyed my trust, and my parents had abandoned me when I needed them most. I wasn't sure I could trust someone again. But something about Dominic stayed in my mind. Like 2 weeks passed, and I finally gathered the courage to send him a message, something super casual like, "Hi, I'm Claire. We had dinner at your restaurant a few weeks ago." And he responded immediately, like he'd been waiting for me to write. We started talking, first by text, then by phone, and eventually we met for coffee. That first date was probably the most awkward of my life because I was so nervous I spilled my coffee twice. But Dominic was so patient and sweet that by the end of the afternoon I felt comfortable with him. He told me about his family, that they owned a pretty well-known bakery chain in the region, that he'd decided to open his own restaurant to do something different, and that he'd been single for like a year after a relationship that didn't work out. Things with Dominic were different from the start. He didn't pressure me, respected when I needed space, and little by little I started opening up and telling him about Trevor and the divorce. I didn't tell him about my parents right away. That was something I kept to myself for a long time because honestly I was embarrassed to admit that my own family had abandoned me. But after like 6 months of dating, one night when we were watching a movie at his apartment, he asked me about my family and I just couldn't keep lying to him. I told him everything, from the night I showed up at my parents' house to how I hadn't spoken to them in years, and I expected that maybe that would make him reconsider our relationship because, who wants to be with someone who has so much family baggage? But Dominic just hugged me and said, "Your family are idiots, Claire, and you deserve so much better than that." We stayed together. Things got more serious. I met his family, who were incredibly welcoming to me from day one. And after like 2.5 years of being together, Dominic proposed to me. It was a really sweet proposal. Nothing over the top. Just the two of us on a beach during a weekend we took to disconnect. And obviously I said yes because this man had proven to be everything Trevor never was. I was excited, happy, and for the first time in years I felt like my life was exactly where it should be. We posted some photos of the engagement on social media. The typical photos with the ring and sweet messages. And honestly, I didn't think much about who would see them, because I had most of my family blocked. But turns out my parents found out. I don't know exactly how. I guess some mutual relative saw the photos and told them. Or maybe someone showed them directly. The point is that like a week after we announced the engagement, I received an email from my mom. An email. After literally 5 years of no contact. The subject said something like, "Congratulations on your engagement." And when I opened it, it was this super long message where she basically said that she and my dad had seen the news, that they were very happy for me, that they had always wanted the best for me, and that they'd like to reconnect and meet Dominic. I read that email like 3 times because I couldn't believe the audacity. Not a real apology, not an acknowledgement of what they'd done, just this sudden attempt to come back into my life like nothing had happened. I showed the email to Dominic, and he immediately said, They researched my family, didn't they? And he was right. It was too much of a coincidence that after 5 years of total silence, just when I get engaged to someone whose family has money, my parents decide they want to reconnect. I deleted the email without responding, thought that would be enough for them to get the message, but clearly I was wrong because 2 weeks later they knocked on my apartment door on a Saturday morning. I opened without thinking because I was expecting a delivery, and there they were. Peter and Christine, my parents, standing at my door with flowers and huge smiles, like this was a normal family reunion. My first reaction was to slam the door in their faces, but my mom put her foot to prevent it and started talking fast. Claire, please just listen to us for 5 minutes. We made a mistake years ago. We want to fix things. Please let us explain. Dominic came out of the kitchen because he heard the commotion, and when he saw my parents, he immediately got between them and me, like very protective but calm. He told them that if they wanted to talk to me, they needed to make a proper appointment, not just show up unannounced. But my parents completely ignored him and kept talking, saying things like, "We know we were wrong. We wanted to give you time to calm down. But now that you're getting married, we feel like it's the perfect time to reconcile as a family." The way they said it sounded so fake, so rehearsed, that I wanted to scream. My dad wasn't even looking at me directly. He kept looking around the apartment like he was evaluating it. And my mom, I couldn't stop staring at the engagement ring on my hand. I finally found my voice and told them, "I don't want to reconnect with you. You abandoned me when I needed you most. You blamed me for something that wasn't my fault. And now you show up only because you saw I'm marrying someone from a family with money." My mom tried to deny it, saying it wasn't about the money, that they genuinely wanted to be part of my life again. But the way she said it wasn't convincing at all. And then something happened that basically confirmed all my suspicions. My dad looked at Dominic and told him, "We hope you take better care of our daughter than her ex-husband did," and added something about how marriage requires work from both sides, like implying that I had been at fault with Trevor. Dominic tensed up. I felt how his energy literally changed, and he very calmly but with a scary voice told my dad, "With all due respect, sir, but the only person who didn't take care of Claire was you when you shut the door in her face at the worst moment of her life." My mom tried to interrupt, but Dominic raised his hand and continued. "And just to be clear, our combined net worth is approximately $8 million. So if you came here thinking you're going to get something from us, you're very wrong." The silence that followed was brutal. My parents just stood there like statues. My mom turned red and my dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Dominic then told them they had to leave, that if they wanted to try to reconcile with me, they needed to start with a real apology and give me space to decide if I wanted that or not, and literally shut the door on them. I stood there shaking. I don't know if from rage or adrenaline or what, but Dominic hugged me and told me everything was going to be okay, that he wasn't going to let anyone hurt me again. I thought that would be the end of it, but a week later I got a call from my paternal grandparents, Leonard and Clara, who basically scolded me for half an hour about how I had spoken to my parents. According to them, I had been disrespectful, rude, and that I should be grateful that my parents wanted to give me another chance after how I had ruined my first marriage. I hung up on them mid-call because honestly, I couldn't listen to any more of that garbage, and then blocked their numbers too. They sent me an email a week later, another long message about how I had attitude problems and needed to learn to forgive, but I also deleted it without reading all of it. Like 2 months passed without anything, and I started to think they had finally given up. Dominic and I continued with the wedding plans, which we decided to make something small and intimate, just close family and friends. Oscar and Hazel said they'd try to come depending on their health. Angela and Stephen were obviously going to be there, and Dominic's family was super excited. One day, I think it was a Thursday afternoon, my parents showed up again at my apartment. This time Dominic wasn't there. He'd gone to a meeting with his suppliers, and when I opened the door and saw them, my first instinct was to close it immediately. But my mom started crying and my dad looked genuinely remorseful for the first time. They asked me to please listen to them, that they'd been thinking a lot about what happened, and that they finally understood they had been completely wrong. My mom said, through tears, that they had been horrible parents, that they had no excuse for what they did, and that if I could never forgive them, they would understand, but they at least wanted me to know they were genuinely sorry. My dad added that they'd been going to therapy together, which honestly I didn't expect, trying to understand why they had reacted that way. and that they had realized they had very outdated ideas about marriage and divorce that had led them to blame me unfairly. I'm not gonna lie, seeing them like that affected me. As much as I wanted to keep hating them, a part of me, that part that was still their daughter and had missed having parents for 5 years, wanted to believe it was genuine. But I was also terrified it was another manipulation, another attempt to get into my life for the wrong reasons. I told them I appreciated the apology, but that I needed time and space to process everything, that 5 years of pain didn't get erased with one conversation. My dad nodded and said, "We understand, Claire. We're not going to pressure you. We just wanted you to know we'll be here if you ever decide to give us another chance." They left after that, didn't try to stay longer or ask me for anything else. When Dominic got home and I told him what happened, he asked me how I felt about it. I told him that honestly I didn't know, that I was confused and scared, but that maybe a tiny little part of me wanted to believe they could change. He completely supported me, told me that whatever decision I made, he'd be there for me, but not to rush into anything, and to take all the time I needed. I decided I wouldn't contact them for a while, that I'd focus on the wedding and my current life, and that if they really had changed, they would wait patiently without pressuring me. The wedding was beautiful, honestly. We got married at a small venue by the ocean, with like 50 people total. Dominic's family was amazing. Angela cried the whole time, from happiness. Oscar and Hazel managed to come, and it was so nice to see them there. Leonard and Clara didn't come, obviously. They still think I'm a bad daughter or whatever. The ceremony was perfect. Everything went as we planned. And that day, I felt genuinely complete and happy, in a way I thought I'd never feel again after the disaster with Trevor. A few days after the wedding, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was my mom, from a new phone because I still had her original number blocked. The message said something like, "We saw the photos from your wedding. You looked beautiful. Congratulations to you and Dominic. We love you, Mom and Dad." It was short, simple, not asking for anything or trying to manipulate. I responded with a simple, "Thank you," and left the conversation there. I'm not ready for more than that, and honestly, I don't know if I'll ever be ready to have a real relationship with them again. Dominic and I just got back from our honeymoon. We're living in a new house we bought together, and things are good. Better than good. I still go to therapy, working on all the family trauma and trying not to let the past ruin my present. Sometimes I think about my parents and wonder if I should give them another chance. But then I remember that horrible night when I was 27 years old, standing at their door begging for help, and I'm not sure I can completely forget that. Maybe with time things will change, maybe not. But what I do know is that I finally have the life and love I deserve, surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. And that, I guess, is enough for now.